Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. The purpose for me hitting record for this episode is to share my experience this past weekend, which I spent in Ottawa attending a science conference on COVID-19, as well as soaking in the vibes of the peaceful protests in Ottawa. I'm coming off a long hiatus of recording episodes with one huge favor to ask of you, my regular listeners, or anyone listening for that matter, whether you're inside Canada or outside Canada in the United States or abroad elsewhere. And that is that I ask that you please share this episode far and wide. And I believe that's so important because getting my very positive experience out into the world is, I think super important given the contrast that exists from my experience and what is being broadcast on mainstream news media and, a state of emergency being declared by the Prime Minister as well as the Premier of Ontario. So this is not my usual joyful demeanor for, biographical episodes. There is no lesson plan per se, no crazy rewilding adventures. And it's very serious because I do believe that Canada is in some trouble. Now, that said, I do begin today's episode with a little bit of a breakdown or an exploration of what ecopsychology is and why I believe that a good majority of Canadians right now would actually benefit from working with an ecopsychologist and adopting this lens or mindset of connectivity with nature. Also in today's episode, and most importantly, I kind of put on that ethnographer hat, if you will, and share my notes from a weekend of, really just diving in and seeing what this protest was all about. So I cover the size of the protest, what I did, my interactions with locals, which for the most part were very friendly and were at the protest, and how protesters were actually blocked in. I think I spent a lot of time here in this episode on that and why I think that's interesting from a legal perspective. And also, obviously paying attention to what the police presence was like and how that was also very peaceful. So I finish with attention to the conversation that a lot of people were saying there, which is shifting to not only, obviously ending the mandates, but like what's next after that, holding decision makers accountable, before the Iron Curtain closes potentially. So overall, I like to think that, I took on that ethnographer role. And again, these are my notes, take it or leave it. I hope that you find them helpful. Again, please share this with anyone who might think that this movement is hateful or full of racist white nationalists. I'm, breaking my silence here from recording episodes because I believe now is the time for all of us to break our silence in whatever way we can or whatever way we feel comfortable doing. I say all we need is that little step, little sacrifice or just embracing some discomfort. If we do oppose these mandates, I'd say now is the time to, break that silence. And that's what I'm doing from, again, the scientific stance that I've been taking throughout most of this pandemic. So please, my fellow Canadians, I ask that, now's the time we all take that one small step. So again, a little bit more of a somber mood to this episode, but I hope you find it beneficial. So I'd like to finish by saying this, that if you are having a hard time with COVID-19 restrictions, or if you have been, or someone who has been, there's plenty of good research out there, coming out now about the benefit people are finding from nature connection practices. So please get out and mindfully interact with the natural world as often as you can in whatever way that you like to. There's no wrong way to do that. And if you feel you need more support, please reach out to me at Shawn at ReWildMyBio.com, and I can put you in touch with an ecopsychologist or an ecotherapist or, alternative health professional. This is something I don't normally, extend to listeners in previous episodes, but I feel like going forward, this is definitely something that needs to be offered here on this platform going forward. So again, take good care, and I hope you find today's episode helpful. Welcome to ReWild My Bio, a self-help and alternative health podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Slade. Join me as I share stories, science, and strategies to help you rewild your biology and redefine your biography. Hello and welcome to another episode of ReWild My Bio. I'm your host, Shawn Slade. This, in fact, is installment number 45 here with the show, and it's been a while, to say the least, since I've hit record here, so I had to dust off the equipment, remember what these buttons do, and we're in action. We've got the red light going, so I want to say thanks so much for being here. I hope you can stick around to the end of this episode today, because I'm going to uncover my observation, and it's a recap slash, kind of adding context to the weekend I spent up in Ottawa observing what was going on with the convoy, the trucker convoy that is in Ottawa. And so, I had to put feet on the ground because I had to feel it out for myself. I'm seeing one message, one narrative that I've been very skeptical of, with good reason from a scientific point of view, as well as just trusting my gut over the last couple of years. Things that I'm seeing on the news don't really hold their weight in water. So I had to go there and see for myself. And that's what this episode here is today. Basically, the whole point of today is to just share my kind of observations and, like I say, and kind of add context to some of the live streams and posts that I was doing while I was there on Instagram. And, you got pictures of me dancing in really large crowds, and that was the one message. I mean, that's what was there everywhere. So that's what a lot of those live feeds showed, basically. And that's just it. That's what that event really was just this joyous celebration of Canadian diversity and love and unity. And it's an amazing opportunity if this message gets out to the masses. And that's why I'm hitting record, because I want to share this, because I think so many people out there have this view that it, could be racist or this white supremacist nationalist movement. And it's nothing even close to that, at least from my experience. So that's a quick intro for today. I do have, some notes here that I'm hoping to hit in order. And so the first real point is kind of what I've already touched on, and that's, I posted some lives on my sacrificial Instagram page, and I, which basically has been the extension of this podcast. As I haven't been hitting record, I'm still trying to write things, food for thought, if you will, and post them online, because I have a hard time completely staying silent in these unjust times. So I want to do this episode to add context to those posts, of me dancing and blowing goose calls, and, as well as comments that I made on these posts, that people who need the current corrupt government to tell them when it's safe to take off a mask, and how I believe that those people need a ecopsychologist. And it sounds harsh saying someone needs a psychologist. I don't know what people need, but I feel that a ecopsychologist would help. And yes, this is harsh to hear, especially if you're someone who maybe is waiting for the government to tell them to take off their mask. Now, I'm not talking about people who need to wear it for work or to make your living. And so I just want to dull the edge here for a lot of people listening, because I know we all have to wear masks at certain times. I do as well, right? So, but I'm trying my best just, really to be radically candid here. And what I mean by that is to be honest, right? To be candid, but that radical piece really does mean to get to the root. And I just did a post recently on Instagram talking about how right now we need to be totally radical. Radical meaning from the Latin word, I think radicus means root, or actually means the word radish, right? So it's a radish. A radish is a root vegetable. To be radical means to go to the root, right? To look at things through like a systems approach, and to actually go upstream as much as possible and get to the root of a problem. And that's what we need to do, I believe. And again, why I'm hitting record today is to encourage everyone to get to the root of this and maybe put their own feet on the ground, or, start looking beyond the mainstream narrative. So I definitely don't like being political, but in these times, I feel like when you've been heavily immersed in political science and health science your whole life, and then you're just watching things unfold this way, and no one really seems to be seeing the same thing. It's discerning, or it's concerning rather, and it's again, need to hit record here and come out of retirement. But what's new in my world, I guess? Why haven't I been recording? Well, partly because, as I'm mentioning, it's quite difficult to come out and speak here on this platform. That looks at things through an eco-psychological lens, where I see us as part of nature, and I see that healthcare needs to expand beyond the biomedical model and include more natural alternative ways. And here we are going the absolute opposite direction. So in these times where I believe people don't need certain medicines to live and be healthy, that view obviously isn't too widely accepted these days, sadly. But I think we're hopefully turning the corner here, as long as the Iron Curtain here in Canada hasn't completely closed. So I've had a couple episodes recorded, as I mentioned in my last episode, but I did not post those just because of the content of them. With this podcast, the stuff that I maybe post online on, say, Instagram, I like to keep this podcast, long in the tooth, provide context, and balance out the content I put elsewhere that might seem provocative or out of context, right? So here I'd like to actually put time and effort into collecting data, reading studies, reading news, interpreting it in my own way, and sharing it with you. So I appreciate you if you like that interpretation, or if you see benefit in these conversations. I mean, that's why I'm doing this, right? So it takes me time to create this content and for it to be thoughtful, and I just don't have time, or at the same time, I don't have time because of my studies, but at the same time, I don't see any benefit per se coming from talking right now. People aren't looking to learn right now, and so why not focus on my studies, right? Which is what I've been doing, and it's going very well. And that's kind of why I had to go see what was happening in Ottawa now, because I have hope in what's happening there and then across the world, and I had to just kind of lay this stuff to rest so I could get back to all things studying. And I do really, truly believe that we are headed into some dark times if the masses do not awaken from this mass psychosis. So either way, I'm not a protest type, and I'm an academic at heart, and I've been writing quite a bit with all things research, and my data collection is officially underway for my study for my PhD dissertation. So I'm looking at individuals' experience of connecting with nature in the forest setting and what that means to their mental health. So we're doing an interpretive phenomenological analysis, meaning we're getting really deep into the experience, the lived experience of, with rich descriptors of what the experience of connecting with nature is like. We know there's benefits to health in connecting with nature, but what is it like for individuals who enjoy, specifically the forest setting? Because obviously forest therapy being popular right now, and, forests are becoming less and less around the world as ecological degradation continues, and we're, plowing down forests for cultured crops and what have you. So anyways, it's, important research, I believe. So other than that, just designing courses for and bringing courses to life this year through piloting different nature connection and ecotherapy courses that I'll be offering. I'm working on a conference right now for hopefully this August with a group called the Health Collective based out of London, Ontario. And it's just different leaders, movers and shakers, if you will, in the fitness world of London, Ontario that want to kind of step into my world of nature connection and health. So should be a very interesting weekend conference, and I'll hopefully have more of that here to report to on the podcast. If not podcast, then through social media. So, please follow along there at ReWild My Bio on the Sacrificial Instagram page. Sacrificial in the sense that I don't even know if Instagram allows people to see my content that, don't agree with these views. If they're anything like the government in Canada right now, they're doing their best to make sure that citizens of Ottawa don't go down to the protest to actually get a sense for themselves of how amazing and what an amazing candidate party they're missing out. I feel like, everybody's getting censored so that people who want to just blindly accept the mainstream narrative can stay asleep essentially, and more easily for them to buy into that. So, but anyways, that's why we hit record, and that's why these podcasters are out there. I mean, a lot of great people doing great things, getting this information out. Well, I haven't been. So I've, at the end of this here today, I'm going to leave you guys a few resources that are a lot more, they're staying current. They're doing timely episodes daily and updates as to what's happening there in Ottawa and elsewhere in the world. So let's first, before we dive into my experience, though, paint a picture as to why I say people need a psychologist if they're waiting for the government to tell them to take off their mask, or so why the need for ecopsychology and what ecopsychology is. So, like I say, please don't hit cancel if you believe that masks are helpful. And if they make you feel safe, that's not my intent to criticize or demean you. I'm being, again, radically candid here. And there's a purpose for this. I have love for you. That's why I'm putting this out there. So I'm sure if you're listening, you may already share these views, but I'm hoping that I can bridge the gap here. I don't want to be divisive in my tone or with my satire in any way, shape, or form. So what I want to say is that I believe that, through working with an psychologist, someone say such as myself, or as I'm becoming to take on that identity more and more here as I get closer to finishing school and looking at what's next for me in helping people. We can replace the safety one feels they get from a mask with the safety from the knowing that we too are a part of nature. And I think that is something that we can easily make a transfer to. If we're, feeling that the mask is our safety blanket, I think we can replace that with nature. And I think a lot of people are doing that and learning about that. And I have a lot of hope because of things I've seen lately with people waking up on and around specifically masks. So as you know, I've done an episode on masks. I've went through a 3-month rabbit hole, put my studies aside to look at the literature around masks. And I guess now could even be good for my little caveat, as I always try to do, just so I don't sound like totally anti-mask. And whether or not I provide literature for this, most likely not, because I don't think people care or look at this type of stuff in show notes when I put scientific literature. Where masks might be beneficial is, say, if you are feeling sick, you're coming down with something, you're run down, you're run down, and you're expelling like particulate matter through your nose and mouth, you're sneezing, you're coughing, that type of symptoms. You're in, you're feeling sick and you have to go out. First, I would say stay home. And this, of course, is considering that the idea of contagion is indeed the way in which we pass viruses. We know that with COVID, it is aerosolized, so masks become less of a benefit. But let's say we are really sick and we don't know if COVID or not, doesn't matter. If we're sick, we put on an N95 mask, and that first and foremost is going to signal, it's a social signal to everyone around us that I'm sick, so maybe keep your distance from me. I'm also wearing this mask, this N95 mask, that actually can block, all particulate matter. It would need to be an N95 mask, though. No surgical mask, no face cloths, no neck gaiters type thing. And yes, so and again, that's assuming that this is the way viruses are passed, which I'm not going to say I fully am well read in that world of science, but it's something that I've been reading more about, and I'm questioning how exactly things are passed from person to person. But again, you'd also wear gloves in this time if you were sick, and you wouldn't be touching your mask or moving it. You'd be putting this on safely in the car. You'd be putting gloves on, going into, say, the pharmacy or the grocery store. Let's say let's hope your pharmacy is the grocery store. But wherever you got to go, hopefully you don't have to go out. So that's kind of the mask 101 if you need to. But again, you wouldn't put a mask on to stop yourself from catching something. That is completely bogus, unscientific. There's nothing that could hold its weight. The methodologies of a lot of the research that I've seen, I just, I do not like them. So, and I have good reason to not like. We don't live in laboratories where the methodologies they're using to test whether or not these things keep people safe, they do not extrapolate well into the real world, I would argue. So, but anyways, back to what is ecopsychology. So let's real quick, been doing a deep dive as I write different sections of my dissertation, and one of which is into the world of ecopsychology through researchers like Andy Fisher as well as Craig Callquist. I've purchased a whole bunch of textbooks. It's been fun since, not recording. Reading textbooks takes time. It's very, very dry material. So need all the time in the world and caffeine and other things to help me stay focused. But let's get into some of the content that is available through one of Craig Callquist's courses, online courses on ecopsychology. And I will leave that in the show notes because it's worth doing, unlike reading scientific papers. The definition of ecopsychology that Mary Gomes, if there's a mother of the field of ecopsychology, it'd be the work of Mary Gomes. And this is from a book, Revision, which was published in the spring of 1998. And it says, ecopsychology emerged over the past several years as an intellectual and social movement that seeks to understand and heal our relationship with the earth. It examines the psychological processes that bond us to the natural world or that alienate us from it. We need to uncover ways to heal the culture as well as the individuals who live in it. Ecopsychology is essentially about becoming cultural healers. So I love that definition for a lot of ways. It says here, it examines the psychological process that bond us to the natural world. So all things nature connection and forest therapy with my research, immersive nature experiences, rewilding, the aspects of rewilding that allow us to connect with nature. And then there's the aspect that alienates us from it, right? So we look at modern day civilization. We look at the past 2 years in the story, that the narrative that's been told doesn't connect us with nature, doesn't connect us with the reality that we are viruses, and that through viruses we've become human, we've become resilient, right? Pushing forth the idea that we need these external medicines to keep us alive, keep us human, when meanwhile these are, in a sense, not vaccines. This mRNA vaccine is not a vaccine. They've had to change the definition of the word vaccine. This is more like gene therapy. We are messing with the human genome through this massive experiment, right? So, and it's about, again, uncovering ways to heal the culture as well as the individual. So I love that, because I often focus on individuals, and I see that as being a part of creating a whole society, a well-functioning society, whereas there's opportunities for others, like, let's say I mentioned Andy Fisher there, who likes to focus on the social connection between the human psyche and nature, right? And where society and culture connect with nature. And yeah, there's healing to be done on both levels. So I think there's just a broad field, and that's why I'm excited to kind of jump into it, I think, with a little bit more of that, erring on the side of the individual and self-sovereignty. And that's why I believe, again, freedom of choice, freedom of speech is so important to having a good whole functioning society, because without whole functioning individuals, we can't have, I would say, the whole functioning culture. We can't mandate it from the top down. It doesn't work that way. So, but yeah, all of us becoming cultural healers. Let me read another one here from Theodore Roszak in The Voice of the Earth. So in the mid-1990s, if there were a father of the field of ecopsychology, it would be Ted Roszak. So ecopsychology holds that there is a synergistic interplay between planetary and personal well-being. The term synergy is chosen deliberately for its traditional theological connotation, which once taught that the human and divine are cooperatively linked in the quest for salvation. The contemporary ecological translation of the term might be the needs of the planet are the needs of the person. The rights of the person are the rights of the planet. So powerful right now in this world. We're seeing the split, and I like the word synergy being deliberately chosen for its roots in, or its theological connotation. And I think that's great, because we're bringing in the divine, the spiritual, and the physical, right? And marrying those two things together. And I think in these times we're seeing science, air quote science, or big science, kind of overstepping its boundaries and being cherry picked and used, obviously, by the ruling elite. So really like that definition. And the fact, again, the needs of the planet are the needs of the person. The rights of the person are the rights of the planet. And so right now, as individual personal rights get squashed on, it doesn't look so good for the planet. And again, I'll talk about this more, but we're going to see lockdowns in the future if these laws don't get revoked completely, and no more asterisks that allow them to invoke, emergency powers that go against the charter. We're going to see lockdowns in the future for climate change, the next bad flu year. If we get another 2017, 2018 flu year lockdown, you know what I mean? This one here is from Andy Fisher in Radical Ecopsychology. Ecopsychology is psychology undertaking that essentially says we too are part of nature. End quote. So yeah, we too are part of nature. So that, with the perspective of, thinking that if we needed masks, then nature's intelligence would have given us one by now, right? So I'll leave it there. Last one is from a group of scholars, individuals, writers that came together I believe within a ecotherapy context. And yeah, so anyways, put forth this definition in the Bay Area of California in the 90s when the field was really kind of taking off. So ecopsychology is the effort to understand, heal, and develop the psychological dimensions of the human-nature relationship, in brackets, psychological, biosocial, spiritual, through connecting and reconnecting with natural processes in the web of life. At its core, ecopsychology suggests that there is a synergistic relation between planetary and personal well-being, that the needs of one are relevant to the other. So again, that one's kind of similar or expanding on the earlier definition from Ted Rozak there. So if my statements about saying someone needs a psychologist still sounds harsh after this, then so be it. I apologize if I've offended you. But that is not my intention. My intention is to lend a helping hand. So at the end, or I shouldn't say at the end, right now, if you are having a challenging time throughout, COVID and everything that's happening in the world right now, and you need someone to talk to pretty much anywhere in the world, you don't have to just be in the Ontario area. I can help you find an ecopsychologist or any, matter of naturopathic doctors, or someone that if you're done kind of following the mainstream narrative and you want to start taking responsibility and taking healthcare, turning healthcare into self-care, please do reach out. People often ask, well, then what are we supposed to do? It's like, yeah, talk to someone, have a therapist, start making steps to enter into a whole parallel society and things like that, which is, kind of what I've chatted at with the last episode on Show Me Your Papers. So, and yeah, I guess again, like vilifying viruses, said this many times, but I should say it again. We shouldn't be vilifying viruses. And I actually have, where is this? I'm going to pull this up right now because I think it's important, and it's someone with a lot more knowledge on viruses speaking on why we shouldn't be vilifying them. And it's coming from Dr. Zach Bush, and this is from, I'm going to take a clip from Aubrey Marcus podcast, and the whole, tag here on this post is stop demonizing viruses. So let me play this right now.
Genetics of the viruses are certainly the genetics of every living being. So the human cell has 20,000 genes, which is a pathetically low number. Fruit fly has 13,000 genes. Flea has 30,000 genes. So you sit a little closer to a fruit fly than a flea in your genetic intelligence, except that it's not the genes that make your intelligence. It's the 98.5% of the rest of the DNA that didn't seem to be doing anything. We, in fact, called it junk DNA that seems to have all the intelligence in it. And we now know that of those 20,000 human genes, over 50% were directly inserted into the mammalian genome from viruses. More than 8% of our genes from mom and dad were actually inserted by retroviruses like HIV. And so we have to fundamentally stop demonizing all viruses. We need to understand them as functions of genetic intelligence. And when our bodies decide to integrate those into DNA, there's a high purpose within that.
All right. There is a high purpose with that, right? So interfering, throwing a monkey wrench because science says, when meanwhile science hasn't even gone through the proper processes of testing safety of, mRNA gene therapy. It's quite alarming, right? So again, we have to reintegrate. This is science. We're not throwing science away here. We are reintegrating, and we are integrating rather the new understanding of what viruses are, and we're looking at them through a lot more of a ecological consciousness, if you will, that we are part of this environment and we interact with it and we get information from it. So it's a wonderful thing. Why else would I say that people need a psychologist? Well, because I did observe a few people, from the brief interactions I had with locals, could tell that they were not doing well. Maybe they were again, I'll touch on what the event was like, but most people are living far away from this. That city's functioning fine. They're sleeping well. There's no horns honking at night anyways. So, but I could tell people weren't well, and I could tell they were out of touch with their true nature from the brief interactions that I had. And I'll speak to that later, potentially, if I want to even go there. But the other thing was just like overall the energy downtown and the energy a few blocks away kind of shows like you have people who are connected with nature. I'm not going to assume everybody is down there because I don't know that. My purpose for being there is from, again, this perspective, this eco-psychological scientific lens saying that we don't need mandates, vaccine mandates. And so when you're there with people that have, for the most part, this understanding, or many just have, without standing on the side of science, have their gut feeling or the trust in God or Jesus or whatever it may be that keeps them, knowing that this isn't necessary. So I can connect with those people. And so when you have that type of environment there, and then just a few blocks away, it's not there, and it's that mundane city vibe. And I mean, Ottawa's not the most beautiful city in the sense of like government buildings with no windows, stone concrete, and sure, beautiful statues and things, but like, and the Parliament buildings are beautiful, but every other building, just kind of, and so that's why you see the need for this type of cultural healing, right? That eco-psychology provides, is that you got this environment of like love, and I'll be saying here in a bit, like just like a pure Burning Man experience, really. And so that's why I'd love to see this energy explode out of there as to what it truly is. And that's why I think it's connecting with people, despite that cognitive dissonance when they talk to their coworker who just consumes 6 hours of CBC a day, right? And it's hard to push back against the mainstream. It's, and that's why I think, again, we're in this for the long haul. But yeah. I think, we're well into today's podcast, and as of right now, here today when I record this, just yesterday on Valentine's Day, the Conservative motion to strike down the mandates, or it was stricken down in the House of Commons. This motion, NDPs and Liberals voted to keep things going. So there are changes here, no mandates apparently, but restaurants can impose them. And, will the politicians admit that this is because of the protests, why they're, backtracking or sidestepping and kind of going back on mandates? Of course not. They're already saying it's because Dr. Tam said that this is the right direction. So, but if you ask me, from what I've seen, it's literally the House of Commons gained like 4 or 5 extra seats, and they're all sitting out on Wellington Street in the cabs of 18-wheelers, right? So, but I'm just putting context here to this episode. So, I mean, it's pretty crazy right now in Canada, and let's just hope that more people, share things like this that are gonna, and I am gonna get to a real cut and dry as to what I saw, what I did, and all that here in a minute. But yes, I just want to say that I truly do believe that why we're seeing everybody step back is because of this energy that this movement's created, and they won't admit the power of this movement because they can't fight what this movement is about, and that is, so they bend the truth and they call these protesters terrorists, and they're doing this, they're totally doing all this backstepping because of the protesters, and they're basically, in the future, we're going to see like lockdowns for the flu. We're going to see lockdowns for climate change. And this is all because of the bogus COVID lockdowns. And the problem, why they're trying to make it seem like it's not because of protesters, because you can't fight, the spirit of love. You can't fight, you can't control that. And that's how they operate, is through division. And everything that I've seen there basically confirms that they're pointing their cameras, their paid mainstream media cameras, right towards the story they need to tell. So you can't control unity, love, peace, togetherness. It was truly, I saw those things in the most amazing Canadian fashion. That's how I experienced Ottawa. It's diversity at its finest, Canada at its finest, Canadians at their finest. And I'm just, again, super proud to be Canadian again. And, part of that weekend. Truckers, like, you have my support after what I've seen and who I talked to and everything like that. It's not a, white nationalist, supremacist, it's racist. I don't know how CBC is getting footage like that. They'd have to have, people staged throughout, getting the dumbest people, the drunkest guy falling over or whatever, or like staging things, or maybe people are coming with a Nazi, with a swastika flag. I don't know. I never saw it, right? So, really, like, the mandates are supposed to be coming to a close here in Canada, so that's a good step in the right direction. There is no more QR code, so they say. I say, yeah, right, wait till the next big flu season. And what I found really interesting here is what the conversation starts to be amongst people that I'm rolling with, or is now what's next? Who's getting fired and who's going to be, seen in front of a judge? The science is there to support. The politicians and the bureaucrats knew that masks, social distancing, vaccines weren't doing, or were doing harm. They knew this. These reports were given. They've seen these things. They chose to ignore them. They chose to keep pushing mandates that were hurting people. So, really, why do that? What is this for? It's not for health and safety. You're going against it. The science shows this. This is not for our health and safety. And so these truckers who don't know the science per se, maybe they do. It's not for me to say. I don't know. But maybe, they at least now know, I think, through that weekend, or at least from that science debate that I had attended, which I'll get to, they know what their heart tells them is true. When you see big truckers crying and doing this for kids, you can't beat this. Well, I shouldn't say can't, unless, of course, like some agent provocateur comes in and ruins the whole peace, love, unity vibe that is being created from there. Or something happens anywhere in the world right now that, is at one of these convoys and they try to blanket everyone as, terrorists, right? So if that happens, I think the world will erupt in some really dark times and it will be quite scary. So, from a political science standpoint, has the Prime Minister of Canada just declared war on his citizens by, invoking the Emergency Security Act or what have you? It's pretty scary, but the paradox is real. And here we are to talk about the truckers here finally, as I've provided context for words and things that I've done, I guess. I wanted to do that first. But really, like, the paradox is real. We've got the excesses of consumer culture, semi-trucks, saving that which is good in the modern world, things like freedom, self-sovereignty, believing in a loving God, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's just like the paradox is real. So here we are living, as I always say, right? So the size of the protest, how big is it? It's much smaller physically than I thought it was going to be. There's probably around 400 trucks, I thought I heard, throughout the downtown core mainly. There are a couple other peripheral camps that are just basically parked, one on the street, one in a parking lot, remaining quiet, self-sufficient, self-governing, in a way, like, police presence is there. But as far as the size here, I want to stick with that. The energy is much bigger than what physically I saw. So it's kind of like when you go into New York City, or so I've heard people say, it's smaller, but at the same time, it's bigger in the sense of the energy or the aura or what it, feels like. So it feels bigger than it looks. And again, it's like feels identical to Burning Man, living in the present moment, gifting, radical inclusion, cleaning up after yourself, seeing people picking up cigarette butts. The protest in a way almost seems like it was for show, as I was saying with the people I went with. It seems like it was for show. And this is because truckers are actually blocked in and they can't leave. I'll talk more about that, but it's weird because the government's telling them to leave, but they're actually blocked in. They can't leave. And all lanes that need to be open for emergency traffic is completely open and functioning. The city is functioning in that regard. Like, again, you travel one block outside of the city protest, say 4 blocks from Parliament, and it's like a regular functioning city. It's with a big, huge festival going on downtown. There is no state of emergency here, right? It's just like, now that said, on Saturday, the place did erupt into a sea of people from all over Canada, a very eclectic group from, you had the smell of cannabis in the air. It was strong, just as, Justin Trudeau likes the party. Justin Trudeau, the party animal, likes, but like, again, very eclectic group, business professionals, artists, like everything in between, black people, white people, gay, straight, a lot of indigenous presence there. And again, people from all over, people who tell their story, someone's, listening to someone play music, they're French Canadian, dad was from Jamaica, or mom was French Canadian, dad was from Jamaica, like just true salt of the earth Canadians. It was amazing. So as far as the reaction of locals go, what did I witness there? So they're laying on the message pretty hard, within Ottawa, that everyone that's there is carrying disease, right? So the stay inside message is strong. It's almost like people don't want to be out and about. And I understand that this convoy rolled in there pretty hot and heavy and loud. And for a while, there was a lot of horn honking all hours of the day. So once that got cleared up and the message, that's why we're seeing this change again. They listened, all right? You can't not listen or you'll go deaf, basically. So like Professor Brian Brittle there, he was presenting at this conference and he was telling a story about they're actually testing the snow for COVID because they're worried about these people expelling COVID into the. So again, Ottawa is a stronghold of government employees, a very stronghold of liberal support. So it's obviously it becomes like people taking on their political identity, right? And getting very upset seeing all these people from Alberta and cowboys in town. Everyone's wearing camo and, went into an LCBO and the manager kind of commented, "Oh, is it hunting season? A lot of people wearing camo." And it's just like, didn't know you could make such a comment in such a demeaning kind of way under his breath. It was weird. And other people had honk if you love Trudeau signs and the odd sign, you'd see leave our city alone or what have you or whatever. Right. And I saw no counter protests or anybody like that. Restaurants were open and closed at the same time. It was weird. I don't know why they all weren't open. Most washrooms most places that were open, their bathrooms, washrooms were closed. So, again, I don't know why places aren't open making a killing. I gather they were open, then they closed, because of a state of emergency or something like that. And so businesses that decide to stayed open. Like I went into a few, no mask and no QR code, and you could sit there and eat, and no one's saying anything, right? So, places that were cool. Who knows if Gestapos are going to come raid them now? But other than that, I didn't see much of way of locals being put out by all of this, right? If anything, they should head down there and see for themselves rather than just watch on TV as to what's happening, because they really are missing out on an amazing Canada Day party, essentially for everyone's benefit, right? And everyone's included down there. So did have one interaction with a guy who just basically we were walking back to the vehicle, and this guy under his breath who, looking the other way, had a mask on outside and just yelled out, "You stand up to bullies." And then that's all I kept walking. I was silent. I didn't bother saying anything. And then I guess he added to that, "You lost the election, go home." So a lot of assumptions in there, and a lot of childlike energy, and just I just really felt bad. I had pity for this person, to tell you the truth, because just I could understand and empathize what was going on with them. So again, didn't see any counter protesters, but that was basically the interactions with locals. Hotel room, it was hard to find a hotel room, but we managed to find one for 3 nights. So. But yeah, then the hotels were pretty much booked right up. So what did I do? Well, I danced. If you've seen that on Instagram, I definitely danced a lot. Gifted lots of food to people in need. Looked at art, what people would call protest signs, but again, with the Burning Man theme, it looked at art. Went to a science debate, which was cool because I did that at Burning Man too, with all the map stuff around psychedelic research. But went to a science debate that was really more like an emotionally filled presentation of science that supports that this mandate is over, that lockdowns are ineffective, that the vaccine has failed, and there's no scientific basis for mask mandates and vaccine passports, etc. Right? So, this was in the basement of a hotel room. Dr. Tam et al. Were invited, but didn't show. Dr. Brian Brittle, Dr. Alexander, and Dr. Hutchinson I'm forgetting first names right now, but I hope to maybe put this into a blog and some of the actual papers that they had shared. And again, things I've seen in the past, but some new stuff as well. And just overall, just hearing their stories, and, Dr. Brittle of hearing stories about, being called to court and producing 240 pages of scientific evidence and, explaining what it meant in regards to the case. And then the Crown attorney or what have you would just basically present a 32-page summary, just saying things like, referencing almost referencing blogs and referencing the scientific consensus on the World Health Organization's website, which again, it's not for the World Health Organization to decide what the consensus is. That's for people like Dr. Brittle and scientists to decide, right? To present and explain. These people are saying this is the accepted, scientific understanding of this. It's quite scary when you're seeing science basically being turned into politics. So other than that, what else? Thursday we got into the hotel room late, stopped to grab some supplies and whatnot, and then walked around. Very quiet night, no horns honking at all. And then Friday got up, went downtown for around lunch, did an Instagram live that is posted up there, and my phone died actually, so I couldn't save all of them, which is unfortunate because it was cold there. And so I wish I had these, but anyways, the science debate, that's also up there. And the audio quality gets better, I think, some minutes in, but other than that, walked around, and I said danced, talked to people, met Randy Hillier, spoke with Kristen Nagel. We met up. That was great. Played hockey, played street hockey, and like I said, fed people in need, fed people without jobs, fed people that were standing up for their rights. And if that's a crime in Trudeau's Canada, then I guess I'm a stone cold criminal for feeding people who are in need. If giving someone a sandwich makes me a criminal, then oh well, I guess, right? And of course, last but not least, was with someone who I'm actually a former guest on this podcast, Drake Larson, professional goose caller, the Goose Man, hashtag the Goose Man. You can look him up. He's like famous from the weekend. The injunctions there, you couldn't honk, but of course, goose calls wasn't on the list. So he owned a goose outfitting business. So his goose call game is on point, and the smiles on people's faces was the best thing, because we're walking around together, and he's calling out the goose call, and everyone's applauding and taking videos. So that was the other thing that I did. That was fun. That was me being involved in the protest, because I did have my goose call as well, but not nearly as good as Drake's. So now I'm going to talk about the protesters being blocked in. I could go into that scientific debate, but since it is on Instagram and out there already, you can hear it for yourself. And I'm sure there's other better audio. I mean, it was fully packed with press, alternative press. There was no mainstream media there, obviously, either. But everything is there. So, I mean, check that out. And it's, science confirming that this pandemic is over, period, full stop. That's it. It's over. So, and it was great to kind of carry that energy out of there. And you're stopping at, roadside service stations and that along the 401 going home, and people, everyone walking around with no masks, and then everybody else looking like, what's going on? And seeing other people just take off their masks. It's super contagious. So a lot of hope, I guess, from going. And me being there, it was very healing for me. And at that science, debate, standing on the side of science, like that, it really does kind of makes you feel like you're not crazy, right? So it was very, very beneficial and healing for me. And it was great to be there with the guys that I was there with, as we've, been sharing research studies here and stuff on our thread since the beginning of this. And, just doing all that lamenting that I think you need to do a healthy amount of with friends. And so, it was a blessing to be there, without a doubt. So protesters are blocked in, which sounds weird, but they're making it out to be an occupation. And I do like that word here in some ways, as because it has that feeling, but it's not, let me say this loud and clear, this is not a physical occupation by any way, shape, or form. The protesters are blocked in. City streets are functioning, and they're working together. And I'm going to read from Webster's, it's Webster's dictionary here. I've got definition of the word occupy. So the act, one of the definitions is the act or process of taking possession of a place or area. So they don't have the control of a place. The police do. So they haven't occupied in this sense. Who has control in this area is not the truckers. They are citizens of Canada on a vacation, if you want to say, parked on the side of the road, sometimes in the middle of the road, and blocked in. So if you're blocked in, you're going to arrange, if you're parked on the side of the road, you're going to arrange, I'm not a lawyer, but these arguments can be made. There's nothing wrong here. There's nothing illegal about what these people are doing. And the other thing is that this area is totally self-governing, as in it doesn't need police to keep them safe. It is totally self-reliant and capable of interacting peacefully with the city. So it's adding life to the city, I would say. It's a beautiful neck of the woods, in the city. It's democracy in action, really. It's so I don't like the idea of calling it an occupation in a physical sense in any way, shape, or form, because it's not that. I more so like another definition of occupation, which I would say maybe the holding of an office or position. And so, as I mentioned before, it seems like the House of Commons just gained an extra few seats, and they're inside of semi-truck cabs. So they're more so holding a position, not an office. Maybe Parliament, maybe the House of Commons just got a little bit bigger, but they're holding a position. That's what they're holding. It's it's a cycle. It's an idea. It's a position. And that's where I could see there's an occupation, because this energy is rippling out around the world. So it might, again, it just feels totally like, to them, suffocating. Oh, these truckers are everywhere. And sure, they rolled in hot and heavy, but what you're seeing now is is an energetic occupation, in the sense of like they're holding their position. They're there holding a position. So these occupiers are holding the line on their position. And that's why that whole saying, you walk around all weekend and you yell freedom and you say, hold the line. And then often met with, I love you, and things like that, right? So there is no physical possession. It does make me ask, why block protesters in, though, and call it an occupation, right? There's clearly a need for that. And if you look into political science and historically, that is a move of authoritarian or communist regimes. So it serves a purpose for them. They blocked off the war monument for fear vandals won't destroy it. So they take a picture of it, right? Pointing it on, pointing government-funded media in the direction of a story that spreads fear and divides. That's what I saw. This is my unbiased observation of what is happening here. I sought out, mainstream media. I couldn't find them anywhere down there. I was actually interviewed at random by 104.7 in Ottawa about the state of emergency. They said, Doug Ford just declared a state of emergency. What do you think? And I said, yeah, I think I don't see a state of emergency around here. I looked around and I don't see it down here. But I do believe there's a state of emergency, and I believe that state of emergency is the mental health and the mental well-being of individuals in Canada and around the world who have had to listen to this propaganda and all this government silliness, right? So I do believe there is a state of emergency, but it's not the same one he's talking about. So that was it. That was the only real, that was totally at random. Just got stuck in my face and wanted to say all the things. So that's what I chose. And, a trucker piped in and everyone around it was really good. And MTV was there actually, which made sense because the playlist here you can actually check out the Spotify playlist. It's pretty rocking, all freedom inspired tunes. And so yeah, MTV checking out Justin Trudeau's new crib. They were there. So that was cool. But yeah, back to them being blocked in, supporters come in and yeah, sure, renting out hotel rooms. There was a buzz that the government was using taxpayer dollars to buy out rooms, but I would say on Saturday it was definitely busy in the sense, but I don't know, to have no rooms in hotels throughout the week, it just seems kind of weird. There's not that many people down there. And I can't, of course, confirm that taxpayer dollars are going to buying out hotel rooms, but totally, streets are controlled by police, and they're dancing and going to shift change by themselves. They're walking through crowds, police officers with their backpacks, going to a shift change, getting high-fived along the way. And then when they make it to their gate, most times they're sitting there tapping their feet, right? So if you watch CBC, you'd think there's cops in riot gear everywhere. That's just not the case. There's no cops in riot gear at all. In fact, the only scary police presence was these cops that were all dressed in complete black, and then they wore a red toque, a red cap, and it was that's kind of weird. Again, with political ideologies and colors, and red being communist, and it was kind of spooky. But once you honk your goose horn a couple times in their direction, you realize they're totally harmless. What else could I say? Yeah, so I truly do believe that the terminology around this being the start of World War III, it's quite possible with what Trudeau's done with calling a state of emergency. That's purely political science observation, kind of something aside. Like, because again, what I saw was this peace-loving protest, and what you're hearing is they're terrorists and it's a state of emergency and you're freezing funds and stuff like that. So I would consider that. And I mean, Derek Sloan had sent out an email. I'm on a newsletter list, and he's asking, or he's basically stating that, yeah, he believes that Trudeau has declared war on his own citizens. So it's very scary, and to be here in Canada right now. So please, if you're outside of Canada, share this far and wide with people. We need help here. This is normally throughout history in international relations. This is normally when Western countries would send help to their allies to stop this type of authoritarian or communism, and it's not happening here for Canada, right? And it's scary when you look at all the documents of, or I've heard of anyways, U.S. military documents saying where they're planning warfare against, guerrilla warfare against like truckers and, right wing, like people from the South, if you will. Like they've ran these drills. So it's, again, quite scary. And considering I've learned that all this was supposed to happen back in 2007 in political science, it's cause for concern, and hence why I'm trying to get this out before the curtain closes. So anything else about cop presence? Yeah, like I said, they're dancing. I'm just checking out my notes here. They're dancing to the, not dancing per se, but tapping their feet. But yeah, the yellow cop vests, I mean, those were the Ottawa police, you could tell. And I gathered just today the Ottawa chief of police retired, or resigned, rather. I don't know if retired, resigned. So yeah, I mean, the question is, what is happening next, I guess? And like laws broken is, again, I'm no lawyer, and I would say I recommend, so yeah, let me do this now. I'm recommending Viva Fry, which I've checked out initially in the beginning of the pandemic. He's got a YouTube channel. He's from Montreal, and he's a lawyer. And so he's, really enjoyable person. Comes at it as from a lawyer standpoint. So he's trying to remain neutral in a lot of things, and he does a really good job interviewing, I believe. So he's one. Another one that I've just caught wind of here this weekend was Crackpot Farmer. He's giving live feeds and stuff like that from Ottawa every day. So if you really want a ground level as to what's happening there with the protesters, that's definitely a great spot there. Kristen Nagel as well has been doing a lot of good covering on things, and she's of course with Canada Frontline Nurses. She's a nurse that was fired here in London, Ontario, and has been doing a lot of reporting down there, a lot of live streams and that as well. What else? So yeah, government freezing funds. So yeah, ways in which I believe the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, these are the laws that have been broken if the Charter of Rights and Freedoms still exists. So government freezing funds. And again, there's probably some type of way that, Liberals can, they know they're getting around this by enacting emergency powers and stuff like that. But I would say the grounds on which they've enacted those powers were falsified, and we can prove that. So therefore, I'd say this is them breaking the law by freezing funds, and then mandating an experimental vaccine that hasn't been tested, with no way of finding out who's become sick or from taking it, or there's no liability to manufacturers. No long-term testing, doesn't meet the definition of safe. So, and then of course, elected officials making money from vaccines all the way to, say, selling COVID signs, right? So Doug Ford, we know, owns a sticker company or a sign making company, and all government offices had to get it through his company. His net worth, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, was $3 million, went up to around $50 million now. So a lot of laws broken, and that's where I think the conversation needs to shift, and I think that's where this conversation can end, because I really have nothing else to say as to what my experience was, other than it was an amazing, fun, healing experience. There's highs and lows. There's that risk of, are they going to break out the riot gear, which they don't. So when you leave out of that experience without having to see that or experience anything negative, it was truly, it was just truly awesome to be a part of. One other thing that I did see was a bunch of war veterans take down the fencing around that war memorial. And I posted that as an Instagram live as well, kind of explain what I saw there. But yeah, I gather, like, again, they roped this thing off and just to take a picture and put it on the 6 o'clock news. And was no need to rope off this. There's no need to rope off anything there. It's peaceful. No one's vandalizing anything, right? So this war memorial, they took down the fencing, and then there was a whole bunch of veterans and a priest, pastor, someone there from a church who had done, a service basically. And it was quite powerful. We showed up right while the police were obviously watching them like stack neatly this fencing to the side. And it kind of got, these veterans got down on one knee and were yelling to join us and we love you and thank you. And so the police just kind of, kept walking. And no need to rope these things off. No one's looking to vandalize anything. And so, again, I think that's everything. What a great experience. If you can get out to Ottawa and you can do it safely, please do. We need good hearts and good people with feet on the ground there. Keep the baggage or the unrest or the anger, keep it at home. Of course, there's places there to talk with people who, probably share your anger in that. But I think getting out and really just putting boots on the ground there. And, if you can support people that are in need, that are down there right now, I think that's an important thing too. But the conversation, like I said, needs to shift, and it needs to shift to holding individuals accountable, whether that be through the legal system or through firing people. But I think lawyers are starting to pick up their phone, and I know the paradox is real when you're putting all your stock in these, in the rule of law and going through things peacefully and through lawyers. And it's unfortunate that it has to go that way, but luckily that is the way that this society at least had always operated, in a just way. And why I believe this neck of the woods, why the Western world is great, despite some of the downfalls of this society. There's a lot of good things that have come out of it. And I think the rule of law just kind of showed me through all this. I do enjoy the rule of law because it is there to protect us, right? So anywho, I really appreciate you guys listening. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns about, my experience or your experience was different, if you're a citizen of Ottawa and you enjoy the show and you are, experiencing things differently than what I have laid out here, then I'd love to hear from you. I hope to be posting more podcasts, but I can't guarantee that right now. I'm going to put most stock into the newsletter. So if you do want to stay in touch, that's where you can, find me there, ReWildMyBio.com. Head over there, sign up for the newsletter, and stay tuned for all of those future courses and conferences that I'm going to be piloting this year, and hope to have more things written for you all to read. So as always, thanks for listening and stay wild. Thank you for listening to the ReWild My Bio podcast. Please subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star rating if you have enjoyed this episode. I have so much gratitude for all of you who continue to share this show with your friends. It really does mean so much to me. If you want more content from ReWild My Bio, then please check out ReWildMyBio.com to find previous episodes and sign up for the newsletter. In the newsletter, I share blogs I have written and reflections from my current health promotion research. Please follow along on Instagram and Telegram with the handle @ReWildMyBio and on Twitter @Shawn Slade. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, stay wild.